My name is Ezekiel Troyer, and on January 4th, 2016, I died. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I mean it literally. One moment, I was riding home in my buggy through the snowy hills of eastern Indiana, and the next, everything went black. But before I take you into what happened during those terrifying moments between life and death, you need to understand the kind of life I lived. I was born Amish, raised in a small farming community outside of LaGrange County. We didn't have electricity, phones, or cars. We traveled by horse and buggy, lit our homes with oil lamps, and followed the ordinum, a strict, unwritten code of behavior passed down for generations. From the outside, my life looked peaceful, simple, even holy. I worked as a carpenter alongside my father, just like his father before him. I wore plain clothes, spoke only Pennsylvania Dutch and English, and I never, not once, missed a Sunday worship. I believed with all my heart that obeying the ordinum was the only way to stay right with God. I didn't drink, I didn't curse, I didn't mix with the outside world. I tried my best to honor my parents, respect the elders, and walk humbly. But what no one knew, not my brothers, not my bishop, not even my wife, Sarah, was that I carried something inside me that scared me more than sin ever did: doubt. There were nights I'd lie awake in bed staring at the wooden ceiling, the room lit only by the dim glow of the lantern, and I'd whisper questions I didn't even know how to answer. God, do you see me? Is this really what you want? I didn't say those things out loud. I couldn't. In our world, questions were dangerous. Doubt was prideful. Feelings were a distraction. We were taught that salvation came through obedience, not emotion. So I pushed the questions down and told myself that if I just worked harder, prayed more, and stayed quiet, the feelings would pass. They didn't. That morning, the snow had come down heavy during the night, blanketing the roads and fields in thick, quiet white. I remember stepping outside just before sunrise, my breath fogging in the air as I hitched up my horse. It was bitter cold, but that wasn't unusual for January. I had to ride into town to pick up some things from the general store: kerosene, nails, a few tools. It was a routine trip, something I'd done 100 times before. The horse trotted along slow and steady, and the buggy wheels crunched over the frozen gravel. I wasn't thinking about anything deep, just fences I needed to fix, a shed door that wasn't closing right, what I'd make for dinner. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. I was just coming around a bend near Miller's Creek when it happened. The curve was sharp, and with the snow packed down slick on the road, I was careful to keep the reins tight. But then out of nowhere, I saw headlights. Bright. Fast. Way too fast. A truck was barreling down the hill toward me, sliding in the slush. I pulled hard to the side, yelling to the horse, but there was no time. I remember the sound of tires skidding, metal crumpling, wood splitting apart like dry twigs. And then everything went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Like the whole world just turned itself off. I don't remember the moment I left my body. I don't remember pain, or flying through the air, or even hitting the ground. 1 second I was in the buggy, heart pounding, bracing for impact, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. It was dark, not like nighttime or the inside of a barn. This was different. It was thick, cold, and alive, like the darkness itself was watching me. I couldn't see my hands. I couldn't feel my feet. There was no floor beneath me, no sky above. I wasn't floating. I wasn't falling. I just was. And the worst part of it all wasn't where I was. It was what I didn't feel. God. He wasn't there. At first, I tried to make sense of it. Maybe I was unconscious. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I was caught somewhere between life and death. But the longer I stayed in that place, the more I realized this wasn't just some mental fog or coma. It felt too real, too sharp. The darkness wasn't just empty. It was heavy, like it was pressing against my chest, wrapping around my thoughts. I tried to speak, but my voice went nowhere, like the blackness was swallowing it whole. "Hello," I called out. "Is anyone there?" But there was no answer. Just silence. Endless silence that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. That's when the fear hit me. Not just fear like you feel when you're in danger. This was different. It was like my soul knew something was terribly wrong. I had lived my whole life believing that if I followed the rules, kept myself separate from the world, and obeyed God's laws, I would be safe in His presence when I died. But here I was, and He wasn't here. There were no angels, no light, no comfort, just isolation. And the worst thought I've ever had came creeping into my mind like poison. What if I missed it? What if I lived all those years thinking I knew God, and I didn't? Panic started to build inside me, and all the things I had once been proud of suddenly felt small and useless. I thought about the hours I spent working by lantern light, building furniture without nails just like I was taught. I thought about the times I sat perfectly still in the wooden pews, singing old hymns in a language most of us didn't even understand anymore. I thought about how I judged others in silence. The younger men who asked too many questions, the families who moved away, the ones who wore colors that were too bright. I followed the Ordnung perfectly, but I couldn't shake this feeling that maybe obedience wasn't the same as faith, that maybe I had followed the rules so hard, I never actually followed God. And then I broke. I dropped to my knees. Or at least it felt like I did, though there was no ground beneath me. I wasn't kneeling on dirt or stone. It was like my soul itself had collapsed under the weight of everything I suddenly understood. I wasn't being punished. I wasn't in flames or tormented. No, what I was feeling was worse than that. It was the terrifying realization that I had built my entire life on something that looked right but was hollow inside. My voice shook as I whispered, "Jesus, if you're real, I need you. I need you now." It wasn't a polished prayer. It wasn't one of those recited blessings before meals. It was raw, desperate, the kind of cry that only comes when everything you've depended on falls apart. At first, there was nothing, just the same black stillness pressing in on me. But then, far off, barely visible, I saw it. A flicker, a tiny glimmer of light. At first, I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but it began to grow, slow and steady. It wasn't like a sunrise or a flashlight. It was different. It was alive. The closer it came, the more I realized that the darkness around me wasn't just dark. It was retreating, pulling back like it was afraid. And in its place came warmth. Not heat, but something deeper. Something that wrapped around me and filled the coldest places of my spirit. Hope. And then He stepped out of the light. I didn't need anyone to tell me who He was. I just knew. It was Jesus. There was no crown, no glowing robe like in pictures, but He radiated something I can't even put into words. Love, power, truth, all at once. His eyes met mine, and in that single moment, I saw everything. Not just what I'd done, but who I was. He saw the pride I didn't admit to, the doubt I tried to bury, the quiet judgment I held against others, the fear I masked as faith. And still, He didn't look away. He didn't condemn me. He just looked at me like He had been waiting a long, long time. I wanted to fall on my face, to hide, to disappear. But I couldn't move. Not out of fear, but because I had never in my life felt so exposed, and yet so safe at the same time. His presence was like standing in front of a fire you know could burn you, but instead, it warms you to your core. And then He spoke. His voice didn't echo, didn't thunder. It was calm, direct, deep. It went past my ears and straight into my spirit. He said, "Ezekiel, why did you trust in rules, but not in me?" The words hit me like a hammer, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I didn't even try to defend myself. I just started to cry. I thought I was doing the right thing, I told him. I thought following the ordnung was enough. I thought if I just stayed clean and separate from the world, that you'd accept me. He didn't interrupt. He didn't turn away. He just listened, like a father who had been waiting patiently for his child to finally speak the truth. When I looked up, I expected to see disappointment in his eyes. But there was none, just mercy. He knelt beside me, the king of everything, and he said, "You were sincere, but you never knew me. You followed the law, but you never followed my heart." I couldn't stop crying, not out of fear, but out of a brokenness I didn't even know I needed. Everything I had built my life on suddenly crumbled, and yet I didn't feel shame. I felt free, like I had been trapped in a cage made of rules and silence and quiet pride, and he had just opened the door. I said to him through the tears, "I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know where to start." My voice cracked, and for the first time in my life, I truly meant every word I was saying to God, not because I had to, not because it was expected, but because it was real. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I can't describe what that felt like. It was like every wound I'd carried, the fear, the pressure, the loneliness, started to heal all at once. He said, "You don't need to fix it, Ezekiel. That's not your job. You just need to let me in." That moment broke me, and at the same time, it made me whole. Then he showed me something, not with words, but like a vision opening up in front of us. I saw myself again, back in my community, wearing the same plain clothes, standing in the same fields. But I was different. I was lighter, somehow. I wasn't walking in fear or silence anymore. I was speaking, not shouting, not preaching, just gently telling others about what I had seen. I saw younger men, the same ones who'd always kept quiet like I had, listening, asking questions, crying. I saw my wife Sarah beside me, her eyes full of peace instead of pressure. I saw others begin to come alive, not because they abandoned the ordnung, but because they finally understood that Jesus wanted their hearts, not just their habits. Jesus looked at me again and said, "You're going back." My heart sank for a moment, not because I didn't want to return, but because I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to leave that peace, that presence. I said, "What if they don't believe me?" He answered, "Some won't. But speak anyway. You're not going alone." And in that moment, I knew that the life I had lived before would never be enough. And I knew I could never go back to pretending. I would return, yes, but I would never be the same. The light around us started to fade, not suddenly, but gently, like a sunset at the end of the longest, most important day of my life. I felt myself being pulled away, back toward the world I had come from. There was no fear, no confusion, just this quiet understanding that I had been given another chance, not just to live, but to truly live. I remember whispering, "Thank you," as his presence slipped from my view, and then everything went white. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The lights above me buzzed faintly. Tubes were in my arms, my ribs ached, and I could barely move. My head was pounding, and my throat felt like sandpaper. But under all of that pain, there was something else, peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going right, but the kind that comes from finally being right with the one who made you. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive, but I knew it wasn't luck. I had died. I had stood face to face with the truth. And now, I had work to do. The first time I told my story, it was to Sarah. We were sitting at the kitchen table after I came home. She held my hand the entire time, tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from recognition. She told me later that she'd felt the same emptiness for years, but never dared to say it out loud. Since then, I've told more people. Quietly, gently, sometimes just one-on-one after Sunday service. I don't push. I don't preach. I just tell them what I saw, who I met, and what he told me. If you're watching this right now and wondering if God actually hears you, if you've been living your life trying to be perfect, trying to earn something you were never meant to earn, hear me when I say this. Jesus doesn't want your performance. He wants your heart. He's not waiting for you to get it all right. He's waiting for you to come home. If this story stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories like this. And most of all, don't wait. He's already waiting for you.